Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Lovely to see you all here, and great to see that you managed to navigate the roundabout out there and get in one piece. That was no easy feat, so sorry about that. It's really great to be able to welcome you all along to this, our third investor meeting of the year. I'm Michael Smith and I'm Chairman of First Mortgage Trust. We've had two investor meetings to date already, both in the Waikato at Te Awamutu and Matamata. And out of that, one of the things that came through loud and clear from our investor base is how important these meetings are. It's all very well having digital interfaces and newsletters, but face-to-face is really important. So it's important to you as investors, and it's equally as important to us because we get the chance to share the presentation today, and there's a lot of good news in that. So we want to get it out there and get it out to you personally. Today, the format will be that we'll have Paul, our CEO, provide an update on First Mortgage Trust, and he'll, at the end of his presentation, have a question and answer session for you for things that you may want to know that he hasn't covered. And then we're joined by Dane Robertson from the Tauranga Coast Guard and from Quinn Boyle, who's our youth sponsorship recipient. After the speakers, we'll have some morning tea, and we'd love you to stay and have a cuppa with us. So the world is a pretty different place from when we last met. After 2.5 years, it sort of feels like we're back to a new normal. And as I said earlier, face-to-face presentations are really valuable for both you and for us. But in the same way that we are fiercely protective of your investments, we also took the same approach during the pandemic to our responsibility for your health and safety. And so we deferred investor meetings through that time. The last thing that we would have wanted would to have been to have you exposed to some sort of a super spreader event. So as we haven't been able to hold an event recently, I thought I'd take some time to start just to give you a bit of an idea of what's changed from a governance sense. As I mentioned earlier, my role is chair, and I've been a director for 11 years. And in the 11 years I've been involved in FMT, I've seen the business go through a lot of changes. But throughout that, even through those changes and the up and downs of the economic events, the business has performed exceptionally well. And it's kept to its core focus of quality and investor-first mentality. Those things haven't changed. Since we last met, we've welcomed a new director, Kylie Boyd, and we've farewelled a standing director in Shane Marshall. Kylie's a professional director. She's a director on a couple of Craig's investment partner boards and a number of private companies. She's a chartered member of the Institute of Directors, has extensive experience in corporate and regulatory compliance, supply chain and commercial contract sales and acquisitions. She's a lawyer and brings a wealth of legal and business acumen to the board, and has taken on a lead role as the director overseeing compliance. She's here today, and I would encourage you to make yourself known to her, and she'll shout you a cup of tea afterwards. So we're really pleased to have her along. After 23 years on the First Mortgage Trust board, Shane Marshall retired this year. We would like to thank Shane for his sterling service to the company over a long period of time. Shane, in his time, provided an invaluable link to the investors, particularly in the Waikato, and he retired feeling that the investor confidence that he had built up over time was well secured and in good hands. When last we met here, 2019, the Capital Group Limited had only recently purchased the management rights to First Mortgage Trust. Capital Group share many of First Mortgage Trust's underlying core elements. They've been in business and property financing for the same length of time, 25 years. They hold their investors' interests as their fundamental priority, as we do. And as we have, we've never lost a cent of clients' money, neither have they. They've brought to FMT deep and extensive experience, particularly in development funding, and they've invested heavily into the business with a long-term investment horizon. So Capital Group has proved to be the perfect successor to the foundation shareholders, the lawyers who were the original shareholders and owners of the management company. My only slide is this one that you can see on the screen there. And I like a couple of things, particularly in relation to that slide. It's a snapshot of the fund from inception. And there's a couple of things that stand out for me in that. The first peak that you see in the slide is the GFC. The drop-off afterwards is what happened to our fund. It dropped in size after the GFC. And it took nearly 8 years to recover to its GFC levels. The second thing that you can see is that the fund has grown significantly since then. I think one of the reasons being that firstly the pandemic didn't have the underlying fundamentals that the global financial crisis had. But secondly, I think investors saw the conservative First Mortgage Trust investment strategy and consistent returns as an attractive haven from global uncertainties. The second point that comes out of that, and the corollary really, is that your investment now is, through the growth of the book, now secured over a much larger number of quality properties. Since our last investor meetings in 2019, we've changed our branding. We've got a new logo, and this was a considered decision of board and management and the staff. We felt the previous logo and branding, while having served well over a number of years, needed a refresh. And especially as the world continues to move to digitalisation, we needed a logo that would work across different digital media. And we also wanted something that was forward-thinking and reflected our personality, who we are today. As well as growing in fund and loan size, we've also grown in our team numbers. Today we have 54 staff members, many of whom are here. And that's up from 38 when last we met here. Obviously up on the stage here, you'll see that since last time we met, we've got a new CEO in Paul Bendall, who took over from Tony Kinzett. Tony, TK, successfully led the business for 15 years. We farewelled him last year after 15 years as the CEO. He did an outstanding job skillfully navigating the business through some pretty testing times. He would dearly have loved to have gone on a road show to say goodbye to all of the investors around the country and to be able to join you in person at an investor meeting, but COVID prevented that, sadly. Like Shane Marshall, Tony retired from First Mortgage Trust comfortable and confident in the knowledge that he was leaving the business in great heart and in good hands. And we do have a bit of a bonus because I saw him sneak in fashionably late, and so he's here. So those of you that know TK, a chance to say your own goodbye to him and thanks for everything that he did for the fund over his time there. We've got Paul. Prior to taking over as CEO, he'd worked in the business as general manager for 18 months under TK and worked very closely with him to ensure a smooth transition, and it has been a smooth transition. Paul has over 2 decades of extensive experience in property, financial and banking, and prior to joining First Mortgage Trust, he was a director in property mezzanine finance at BNZ. He's highly experienced and the board's been really impressed with him and what he's brought to the business. So he's now going to provide an update on the business. Please welcome your CEO, Paul Bendall.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 2022 investor presentation. I'm Paul Bendall, CEO of the management company of First Mortgage Trust. Just do a sound check, is that all right? Everyone can hear? Good. We're really pleased to see so many people here today, and we would like to thank you for your continued support. These meetings are a really valuable opportunity for us to not only update you on what's happening with the business, but also an opportunity to catch up face to face, which is something that's easily lost in an increasingly digital and COVID world, but something that remains very important to us. As Michael said, these are our first investor presentations since 2019, my first since joining the company, and I'm sure the first for some of you here today, and we know it's the first time for someone sitting on the other side of this podium, so welcome TK. Whilst there have been a few changes at First Mortgage Trust since 2019, the core essence of the business has not changed, and I will demonstrate that today. These meetings are also very timely with so much happening in the global economy. We've got inflation, rising interest rates, falling property values. It's easy to get caught up in the negative press. But as with every market cycle, these also create opportunities, and this cycle will be no different. And today I'll explain how we manage through this. I also want to provide an overview of First Mortgage Trust, where we have come from, where we are today, and where we want to go. This includes our purpose, values, resourcing, lending models, and where we see opportunity. At the end of my presentation, we'll allow time for questions. If you don't want to ask a question publicly or we run out of time, please feel free to come over during the morning tea to ask either myself, Michael, or one of our team the questions that you may have. Before I start, I must emphasise that I'm not providing financial advice. My presentation today will give you factual information only. My main goal today, though, is to convey a picture of a company that knows what its core business and strengths are, undertakes that business with care and confidence, and is performing to a very high standard. As a business, there are two things we focus on: risk and return, or put another way, resilience and performance. This has been at the heart of what we do for over 26 years now. It is ingrained in our DNA and is reflected in our purpose and values as a company. What do we mean by resilience and performance? It is derived from what you, our investors, have told us, that the security of your investment is equally as important as the return that we provide. You would have noticed in recent newsletters we talk about optimising return as opposed to maximising it. This means balancing risk and return, or bringing resilience and performance to life. As I said, it's ingrained in our DNA and it's central to our decision-making framework. When making a decision, the first question we always ask ourselves is this in the best interest of the investors? And if the answer isn't an emphatic yes, we move on. It's been that way for 26 years now, and it won't be changing. I'm very proud to say that despite the economic headwinds we've encountered over the course of 2022, First Mortgage Trust has never been in better shape. And it's a real credit to our highly skilled team and our unwavering focus on sticking to what we know and living our purpose and values. We are an active manager, and the importance of this has never been more prevalent. We continue to be able to proudly say that in 26 years we have never lost a cent of investor capital, and there are very few businesses in our industry that can say the same thing. So where are we today? The fund size now stands at $1.55 billion. Our loan book is close to $1.37 billion. We now have 54 people located in offices in Tauranga, Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Tauranga remains our head office, with the bulk of the team still located here. We now have over 6,000 investors. And today our loan book is secured by over 1,350 first mortgages located primarily in the key New Zealand markets of Auckland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Wellington and Christchurch. The headline numbers are impressive, but it's the numbers that sit behind this that bring our resilience and performance to life. The average loan-to-value ratio across our entire loan book is now less than 50%. Now, the average for the last 5 years has been 50%, which highlights our consistency in assessing risk. Our front book LVR, loan-to-value ratio, is 48%. What we mean by this is the loans that we've originated over the last 12 months are at a lower LVR than our overall portfolio. And this is us just assessing where we see the market at the moment and taking risk off the table. Our lending ratios are significantly lower than those permitted under our governing documents. The average loan size is $1.8 million. The average loan term is 16 months, and the portfolio is well diversified both geographically and by asset type. We have very low loan arrears, highlighting the quality of the lending that we do. And finally, we don't lend to first home buyers. In addition to our very sound risk position, the fund has delivered consistent returns, and we're very pleased with delivering 5.59% given the quality of our loan book. We've received a lot of positive feedback since announcing the latest return. This included a text message which I received from investors which read, "Hi Paul, what a nice surprise to receive our latest dividend of 5.59%. Congratulations to you and the team. Love, Mum and Dad." Now, my parents are also investors, but their feedback, whilst possibly not the most objective of feedback, is typical of what we receive, but it's fair to say not every investor signs off their communications to me love from. On the investor side of our business, over the last 12 months, investor funds have grown by a net $266 million. This means that we have received a gross $460 million and redeemed $194 million. So to break this down, over the last 12 months, we have onboarded close to 1,000 new investors, with over 6,800 subsequent deposits made. We have also processed over 3,700 investment redemptions. The numbers are very impressive and a real credit to our dedicated team. In tough economic conditions, this really highlights the confidence and support you, our investors, have in us and what we deliver for you. We are very proud of the fact too that over the last 2 years, 80% of our new investors have been through word of mouth. And once someone invests with us, 80% of those people will make a subsequent deposit. A business only consistently achieves these kinds of results from having a clear understanding of what its purpose and values are and having an unwavering focus on bringing them to life. As a team, we recently revisited our purpose and values to make sure that they were still fit for purpose. We looked at who our customers are, what we do for them, as well as the communities that we live and work in. That money that you trust us with helps New Zealanders achieve their property investment goals. It builds houses for people to live in, and it helps shape our communities. In return, we're able to provide a stable return to you, our investors, to help you achieve your investment goals. We put customers at the heart of our business, developing and maintaining long-standing relationships that are built on trust. It's also important for us as a business to be part of the communities that we live and operate in, and we are proud to partner with many local organisations and charities and help make a difference through these sponsorships. We are very mindful of our obligations as a good corporate citizen, and all of this will be captured in the work we are doing around ESG, or environmental, social and governance policies. This is becoming increasingly important to investors, and we are in the process of developing our ESG framework. We have a strong team culture that encourages the development and well-being of our employees. Boiled down to one sentence, our purpose as a business is about creating a better future for New Zealand. A purpose has to be brought to life, and we do this through our values, which are teamwork, integrity and achievement. Teamwork, we care, connect and collaborate. This means respecting and valuing each other and delivering on our commitments. Integrity, we do the right thing. This means taking responsibility, always doing the right thing and using sound judgment. And achievement, we get it done. This means we empower our people to deliver results, and we recognise and celebrate our achievements. These are very important to us, and as I've already said, we live by these, and this is reflected in our results. So turning now to who manages First Mortgage Trust. First Mortgage Trust is managed by First Mortgage Managers Limited, which is a licensed manager under the Financial Markets Conduct Act. We are regulated by the Financial Markets Authority. A key feature of our structure are our supervisors, trustee executives for the Group Investment Fund, and Susan and Karen are here today, so welcome, and public trusts from the PI Fund. They play an integral role in the governance of First Mortgage Trust and have the right of veto on all of our lending decisions. This sets us apart in the market and provides another layer of comfort for our investors. I'm pleased to say that we have a very effective working relationship with both of our supervisors, who comment on the quality of the management of First Mortgage Trust. We are an active manager, which means that we decide which loans to invest in, we make sure the loans comply with the Trust's investment guidelines and policies, and we manage these loans on behalf of you. A key part of being an active manager is making lending decisions based on our skills and knowledge as a specialist property lender, and includes us assessing market conditions and continuously monitoring the market, using the skill and experience of the team to identify and structure the best possible lending opportunities, and managing these loans through to successful completion. The board also plays a very active role in the governance of First Mortgage Trust. A subcommittee of the board is the Loans Committee, which meets monthly to review our lending performance and discuss our lending appetite. There's a saying that lending money is the easy bit, it's getting it back that takes a skill, and that's what we really focus on. The other facet of determining an active manager is to outperform its chosen index. In our Statement of Investment Policy and Objectives, or SIPO, this is exceeding the bank 12-month term deposit rate by 1%. Over a long period of time, we have consistently exceeded this metric. As a manager, we also continue to invest very heavily into the business. Our biggest and most important investment are our people. It is their knowledge, skill and experience that drives our results. Over the last 2 years, we have revisited our team structure to make sure that we have the right people in the right roles to ensure that we can deliver the best possible results for our investors. We've expanded the team, but more importantly, we've created new roles, especially in the senior leadership team, and filled these roles with highly experienced and talented people. These roles include a head of credit, a head of lending, a head of compliance and quality assurance, a head of people and culture, a head of marketing, and the promotion of Roger Ford from financial controller to chief financial officer. In addition to the structure, we focus very heavily on training and development. We make sure that our wider team are kept up to date on current legislation and best practice ways of doing things, but most importantly, that the knowledge and experience that we have within the business is shared right across the team. A big part of our goal as an employer is to develop and promote our staff. People are much more engaged if they see career progression, and for us enjoy continuity with people who know our business, but most importantly, people who know our culture. We don't just talk about this, we do it. In the last year or so, we have had over 10 internal promotions, including 4 into the senior leadership team. To give this context, that's about 20% of our team. We have also just been recognised externally for our work in this area, having just been announced as one of the winners of the top mortgage employers for 2022. This award recognises mortgage industry employers and looks at what makes an organisation one of the best in the industry. To be recognised, you need a staff satisfaction rating of over 80%. It is very pleasing to receive this award, and even more pleasing that First Mortgage Trust was only one of 3 companies to receive this award 2 years running. We also invest very heavily into cybersecurity. Local company Delta Technology Solutions provides a comprehensive security framework, meaning that our systems are monitored 24/7 by both state-of-the-art technology and Delta's cybersecurity team. They are constantly auditing our entire system, even down to our mobile phones, meaning that they can respond to any threats immediately. We are currently developing our online portal for our investors. We know that this is important to you, but this portal is being developed in conjunction with the cybersecurity protection. So turning now to the lending opportunities. We know an important question for you is who do we lend to, where do we lend, and where do we see the opportunities? Firstly, the non-bank sector in New Zealand is continuing to grow, and we are seeing a structural shift in the funding landscape in New Zealand, which is in line with international trends. This has been driven by several factors. Banks are losing the personal touch. Banks are increasingly focusing on debt servicing at the expense of other key factors like the history of the person that they're lending to, or the underlying value of the security of the loan. Don't get me wrong, debt servicing is very important, and we also focus on this, but successful lending is about considering a number of factors, and the banks seem to be losing this. Capital requirements are increasingly making real estate lending difficult and more expensive for the banks, and basically, if the computer says no, they don't seem to be interested anymore. A question that we get asked often is, do you lend to the people that the banks won't lend to? And in part, the answer is yes, but the banks should be lending to these people. Many of them are business owners with strong asset positions who want to invest into their business. Many are over 50 who on the bank models can't demonstrate how they can repay a loan from their primary income source by the time they're 65, despite having a very strong asset position and diverse income sources. And some people are just fed up with dealing with the banks and are prepared to pay a bit extra for the service that we provide. We estimate that the non-bank lending market makes up about 5% of the market that First Mortgage Trust operates in. To give this context, in Australia it's 27% and growing, and places like America and Britain are 40 to 50%. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand has recently published mortgage lending statistics for the New Zealand market. The graph on the screen shows the non-bank lending over the last 4 years versus bank lending. As you can see, the non-bank sector has significantly outstripped the banking sector. Since 2019, bank mortgage lending has grown 25%, non-bank sector has grown 152%. First Mortgage Trust has enjoyed a period of very good growth over the last few years, but as you can see on the next slide, the next graph, mortgage lending in the non-bank sector has been at a significantly higher rate than First Mortgage Trust's growth. And if you refer back to the graph that Michael showed earlier that went like that, when you compare our growth to the market, we're much flatter. And this highlights our strategy to carefully manage our growth and to cherry pick the very best lending opportunities. Given the growth that we have experienced in New Zealand and the trends evidenced overseas, if the New Zealand non-bank market even gets to a share, so non-bank market share even gets to be half of that of Australia, the potential market growth is enormous. So where does First Mortgage Trust want to operate? We want to position ourselves as a viable alternative to the banks and a better option than other non-bank lenders. We aim to be slightly more expensive than the banks, but cheaper than other non-bank lenders. This, combined with a focus on delivery of solutions, will enable us to cherry pick the very best lending opportunities. This is how we optimise your return rather than maximise it. We balance the risk. All of this combined leads us to believe that there are strong future lending opportunities in our key markets, and across the diverse range of asset types that we lend to. So we've covered who we lend to and where do we want to position ourselves in the market. So we'll now look at where do we lend and to what asset types. We have a very diversified loan book across a number of measures. By geography, you can see from the graphs we have 60% of our loans in Auckland, 11% in Canterbury, 10% in Wellington, 6% in the Bay of Plenty, and 5% in Waikato. This means that we have a combined 92% of our loan book located in New Zealand's 5 main centres. And there's a reason for this, that we focus almost entirely on these markets, as historically they've performed well from a property value perspective because they are regions that have growth, employment opportunities, and strong GDP. By virtue of our size, we now have lending experts based in these key markets aside from Waikato, which is serviced from Tauranga. Having our team located in the same areas means that we can actively manage our loans. It's not just about lending money. Successful property lending requires highly active management, and having experts close to our security properties enhances that proposition. So looking at now at our lending by asset type, we don't just focus on geographical diversification when considering the spread of our loans. We also consider different types of assets to lend against. As you can see from the graph, 61% of the fund is secured by loans to residential properties, 21% commercial, 5% rural, with the rest of the fund secured by cash and term deposits. Our percentage of rural lending has continued to decrease over time, and we now originate very little loans in this space. And that's very intentional, as we don't feel we have the in-house expertise to assess this type of lending. As I mentioned earlier, our success has been generated from sticking to what we know and what we are good at. We assess the portfolio to an even more granular level and monitor how much of our lending is an investment, development, or on land. At any given time, our development exposures generally range between 20% to 25% of our lending, and currently we are closer to 20%. Land is similar and generally ranges between 15% to 20%, and we are currently closer to 15%. Looking now at our lending limits, our SIPO dictates the maximum limits we're able to lend on different asset classes. The industry regards these as conservative limits, and rightly so. As you can see from the chart, very few of our loans come close to these thresholds. We are cautious. Under the SIPO, First Mortgage Trust will only lend to a maximum loan-to-value ratio of 75% on residential property, 66.7% on commercial property, and 60% on rural. And as you can see from the table, we are well below our maximums across all of our asset classes. In fact, over 99% of our lending is less than a 70% LVR, and 70% of our lending is less than a 60% LVR. This provides a substantial buffer to market movements, and also means that our borrowers have to have significant equity in the transaction before we will lend to them. The quality of our loan book is reflected in our loan arrears and non-performing loan statistics. Over the last 5 years, our loan arrears have averaged 0.9% of the fund, and as at 30 September 2022, they were 0.76% of the fund. This is an impressive result in any environment, but even more so given the economic conditions. We have no new non-performing loans, which again speaks to the quality of our loan origination, which is driven by our highly skilled team. Our largest loan is only 1.8% of the fund versus a permitted maximum of 5%, and our top 6 lending exposures equate to only 16% of the fund versus a permitted maximum of 25%. We also have no related party lending, meaning that we do not allow directors or staff to take out loans with First Mortgage Trust. This policy has been in place for 26 years now and won't be changing. So as you can see, the portfolio is well spread across all the key metrics that we monitor. Our success has also been driven by being very selective in the loans that we want to write. I mentioned earlier we like to cherry pick the best loans. We get to see a lot of loans come across our desk, but on average we only lend on 1 in 10 applications that comes across our desk. So we say no to 9 out of 10 of the loans that we see. As I said, we like to cherry pick and be conservative. Looking now to the market conditions. As an active manager, we closely monitor economic data and how this may impact on the New Zealand property market. On the negative side, we are paying close attention to the geopolitical tensions, the cost of living increases and how this is impacting on inflation and how that will impact on consumer spending. Interest rates having increased by over 3.5% in the last 10 months, migration outflows and the labour and resource shortages that we're experiencing. On the positive side, the New Zealand dollar is undervalued, which helps our export industry. There is an international food shortage and we are a food producer. We're beginning to see the return of foreign tourists and international students. And finally, the tight labour market means that unemployment is expected to stay low in comparison to other economic cycles. So the impact of this is that the housing market in New Zealand has fallen on average by about 12% so far. Respected economist Tony Alexander believes that the market will continue to weaken for a little while yet, but that we may be reaching the end game of the cycle, but cautions against an expectation of rising prices at this point. We remain cautious in our approach to both our lending and liquidity management, and this is evidenced by the loans we have originated in the last 12 months being at a lower LVR than our 5-year trend. From a liquidity management perspective, we are holding cash reserves well above our required minimum levels. Both of these leaves us well placed to take advantage of the market opportunities that the change in cycle will present. So turning now to our investment returns. As stated in our SIPO, our investment objective is to exceed the average bank 12-month term deposit rate by at least 1%. Over the last 5 years, we have comfortably exceeded this, highlighting the stability in our returns. Based on our 30 September return, this premium was 1.6%. In the last year, we have distributed $76 million to our investors. This equates to a return for the past 12 months of 5.43% after the manager's fee, but before tax. It's also important to note that the costs of managing the fund are borne entirely by the manager, save for the supervisor's fees and a reserve fund contribution. These costs include all staff, premises, technology, marketing, compliance, and cybersecurity costs. We don't charge performance fees, and a couple of years ago, First Mortgage managers made the voluntary decision to share a portion of the loan fees with you, our investors. The management fee has remained at 1.5% for 26 years now. This is a highly competitive fee. It has never been adjusted for inflation, despite costs rising significantly, particularly over the last year or so. So looking to the future, we look ahead with confidence. The non-bank lending sector in New Zealand is growing, and we are in a strong position to take advantage of that growth. By design, our investment policy suits relatively conservative investors, those seeking regular income or those choosing to reinvest their income to increase their investment over time. The nature of the trust structure and investments provides security for capital protection. We're not driven by high returns. As I've said earlier, we seek to optimise the return, balancing risk as opposed to maximising return. We take a relatively conservative approach in the way we manage the fund. We also balance liquidity. We have a minimum liquidity level of 5% of the fund. This is the minimum cash that we need to hold. Liquidity is currently closer to 12%, meaning that we have over $180 million of cash or term deposits with a mix of New Zealand banks. Depending on lending opportunities, liquidity does move around. However, we have a target range of maintaining liquidity at around 10% to 15%. As I mentioned earlier, we're also investing in technology, and we're working on an investor portal. This is something we know that's important to our investors, and we want to make sure that we provide both a great and secure solution. So in closing, the fund is clearly in a strong financial position and has performed exceptionally well in a challenging environment. The fund is now over $1.5 billion, which means we now have even greater access to the best lending opportunities across all the key markets that we target. We have over 26 years of continuous success behind us. There is invaluable knowledge built up within the business. The fund continues to grow, and we, the manager, continue to invest very heavily into the business. Your money is secured by First Mortgages at relatively conservative ratios. In addition, the fund holds significant cash reserves invested with New Zealand banks. And most importantly, our commitment to you. We will strive to do the best for all of our customers at all times. We will always fully comply with all relevant legislative requirements. We will always act in the best interest of our investors. We have been resolute in keeping to our conservative operational policy, and we have maintained our commitment to steady, careful, and well-managed growth. Our results speak for themselves and have done so since our inception 26 years ago. No investor has ever lost capital with us. A highly competitive interest rate has been consistently paid to investors every quarter. So once again, I would like to thank you for your continued support. We're glad to be helping you achieve your individual financial goals, and we appreciate your attendance here today. So I now welcome any questions. So we've never had a breach. We are like every financial institution, in fact, like every business in New Zealand. So the question was, have we had what is our cybersecurity policy? Have we had any breaches? And how many attacks are we getting? And what do we do to minimise those attacks? So the answer is, firstly, we haven't had any breaches. Like every business in New Zealand, but certainly financial institutions, we're constantly being attacked. But the system that Delta are running is both a combination of artificial intelligence and human resources. So they're constantly monitoring those attacks and adjusting for that. Delta in partnership with companies like IBM, for example. So it's an international approach that comes to this, because obviously most of the attacks are coming from offshore. In terms of the system that they're running, they have the ability to isolate all of our devices right down to our mobile phone. So my phone here, if it got hacked, they could actually isolate my phone immediately and keep the rest of the system running and restore the system back to a pre-hack level straight away. So it's as foolproof a system as we can possibly get.
One of our trusted advisors has just informed us that he's called on First Mortgage Trust because of an apparent movement into property development. Can you comment on that?
Yes, we have increased our property development. As I mentioned, it makes up about 20 to 25% of what we do. And it just depends on the market conditions. So property development is a very good lending opportunity for us, so long as it's done well and resourced properly, and that's what we've done. About sort of March 2021, we felt that the development market in Auckland particularly was getting particularly hot, so we actually pulled back from that market, and that's why we're operating at the lower end of our range. So when the market conditions we felt were more favourable, we did a little bit more, and in the last 18 months we've actually been pulling back from that market. But it's not to say we're not going to keep doing it, because there are very good opportunities that exist in that market.
Yeah, just a little bit on ESG. Can you explain what the impact that is on whom and what you can invest in?
We're in the early stages of our ESG response, and it's broken into three areas. So the environmental piece, which is probably the piece that's going to have the greatest impact, so that the fund itself, the trust, actually has zero carbon emissions. It's the manager that is the carbon emitter. And part of the work that we have to look into is how we actually manage or monitoring the carbon emissions from the people that we lend to. So it's quite a big bit of work. We know the banks are doing a lot of work around that at the moment, but that is something that we will have to report on going forward. In terms of the impact at the moment, we don't know what that impact will be. So next I would like to welcome, as I mentioned in my presentation, supporting our communities is very important to us at First Mortgage Trust. We proudly sponsor over 30 organisations, charities, clubs and special events, donating over $130,000 in the last 12 months. These donations are made by the manager from our management fee, but your support of FMT also benefits our communities. This is part of our purpose of creating a better future for New Zealand. One of our sponsors is the Tauranga Volunteer Coast Guard. We have partnered with them for 5 years, with the last 4 years as the premier sponsor. The Coast Guard is a charitable organisation that deserves our gratitude. They watch out for our boaties and marine enthusiasts in our local waters, and it gives us great pride to partner with this worthy cause. So today we have Dane Robertson from the Coast Guard to say a few words, so please welcome Dane.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Dane Robertson and I am the Operations Manager at Tauranga Coast Guard. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul, Michael and the rest of the team at First Mortgage Trust for inviting me and for sponsoring our unit for the past 5 years. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what Coast Guard does and what we don't do and where we're heading in the future. Before I do that though, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Oamaru, so for most of my schooling life I watched our rugby team fight for the wooden spoon of the 3rd Division against the West Coast. They've got a bit better since then, which is good. And for prior to my job at Tauranga Coast Guard, I was a school principal, a primary school principal up at Kaimai School. I did that for 10 years and decided I needed a change, and I was really lucky and fortunate enough to be offered this role as the operations manager. So what does Coast Guard do? We are a volunteer organisation. I'm the only person who's employed full-time at Tauranga Coast Guard. We also have a part-time office administrator and a very part-time assets manager. Gary comes in once a week to maintain our vessels, which we'll learn a little bit more about soon. But most of the time he's a real estate agent, so I keep him in the honest work, working at Coast Guard. Hopefully there's no real estate agents here. They're lovely. Yeah. We have 3 vessels. Our first one is called Tech Rescue. It's about 16 years old. It's the white one that you can see there. It's a catamaran. It does the bulk of our work. And we're actually in the beginning of replacing that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that soon. Tech Rescue was, its maximum speed is about 55 kilometres an hour. And it will handle up to 8-9 metre swells, waves, and 40 knot winds quite easily. We are able to do a lot of work on this boat, and it's a workhorse boat. It has 2 jets, and inside the cabin itself is a number of different ways to steer it. One of the main ways to steer it is with what we call controlling our buckets. So we have a steering wheel, but we also have these 2 levers, and that will direct the water and direct the jets and fire them anywhere. So it actually gives us the ability to move sideways, spin around in circles, which is actually really important when you're barging up a multi-million-dollar vessel and trying to park it back in its berth. It also has a little, what looks like a mouse, and we call it the mouse. And when we push that button, if we slide the mouse forward, the boat will move forward. If we move it to the side, the boat moves to the side. That steering system alone is $70,000. We also have what's called our Sea Legs Rescue. I call it Coast Guard Orange. Waihi Beach Coast Guard calls it Coast Guard Pink. But it's a really neat vessel, and the reason it's really useful for us is if you can look at the front of it or the bow of the boat, you may be able to see a wheel there. And the reason is we have wheels is they actually drop right down, and we park it in the shed, and then when we need it, we drive it out, drive it down the road, drive it into the water, lift up the wheels, and away that vessel goes. That vessel is only about 8 metres long, and when we built it, cost almost $300,000 to get that built. It's really useful though because we don't need a tractor and a trailer to take it down to the boat ramp, so we can get on the water really quickly. It does a lot of our inner harbour work, and its maximum speed is about 70 kilometres an hour, so it's actually a really quick and agile vessel as well. The last vessel there is an AC-36, so it's an America's Cup vessel. We don't actually own it, but we are allowed the use of it. It was originally intended to be down at Taranaki Coast Guard, but Taranaki decided to go up to a larger size. So Coast Guard New Zealand contacted me and said, would you like the use of this? And I said, I'd love the use of this, but I don't want to pay for any maintenance on it. And they said, yeah, we'll pay for that. And I said, well, we've got nowhere to put it. We don't want to build a shed for it. And they said, oh, we could park it somewhere. And I said, there's no somewhere in Tauranga to park it, but what we could do is leave it in the marina. And they went, oh, that's a good idea. And I said, I'm not paying the marina fees. And they went, oh, we'll pay them too. And I said, well, we have to keep it out of the water, so they also paid for a lift. So as we park it, we pump it full of air, the lift, and it lifts the whole boat out of the water, which protects the hull. That vessel is very quick. Its maximum speed is almost 90 kilometres an hour. Not that we will ever do that. And it is capable of actually doing quite a lot of work. The reason that we don't want it, though, is because we're building a new vessel, which I'll explain very shortly. So we're allowed the use of it, but we don't own it as a unit. In the winter, it went to Raglan, it went to the Hawke's Bay, and it also went to Waihi Beach Coast Guard, because they were having work on their vessels and they needed an extra vessel to use. So that's sort of the compromise that we've had is we know that one day that vessel might not be sitting in the marina for us to use. So we have 66 volunteers, and of those volunteers, if we combine their hours, they do almost 10,000 combined hours every year. We have radio operators, which is about just over a third of our volunteers, and the rest are crew. Our radio operators will come in and do a 6-hour shift. So we have 2 6-hour shifts every day, and they monitor the VHF channels and log all our trip reports. So we do almost 30,000 trip reports every year. So every time a boat calls in, We will log it down so we know who's on the boat, we know the numbers of the people on the boat, where the boat's left, where it's going, and its intended time to return. We have 281 vessel assists last year. So last year was our busiest year. This year is almost as busy as last year. In 2016, we did less than half our assists than what we did last year. We average about 12 people every week that we go out and assist and bring them back safely every week. Our crews, we have 4 crews, and they've rotated every week. So starting Friday 8 o'clock, and then they go through to the following Friday 8 o'clock, and they're on 24/7. Most of the crews are employed or self-employed, so they will have to leave their place of work if they get called out during the week. And there's times such as myself that I've been called out at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday because someone's battery was flat as I was fishing in the harbour at 2 o'clock in the morning. But that's part of the volunteering, and it's actually, to be honest, it's actually quite fun as well. This here gives you an indication of actually what's the growth that's happening in the Tauranga area. In a recent study by the Maritime New Zealand, they estimate about 2 million New Zealanders are recreational users of the water. 13% of all recreational users identify the Bay of Plenty as their main boating destination. So we're the second busiest unit in the country. Auckland's the biggest. North Shore, very similar to us, but they don't have a radio room. We do. This here is a little map that I've put up, and this is 2 years worth of assists. Any assist that has like a little wee pink teardrop, that's a police related call out. So most of what we do is what I would call an AA type of assist. So we're like the AA for the water. We'll go out and we'll either jumpstart a boat, deliver fuel, or most of the time we'll tow the vessel back because it's broken down. But every now and then we will get a call out from the police, and that's more of a serious search and rescue operation. And that is run by the police, and we're basically an asset that we will do as the police ask. This here is one of our larger assists at about, I think it was, what have I got up there? I think I got the call at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon saying that there's a vessel that will need to be returned to Tauranga. And I said, oh, yeah, no, we can sort that out. Where is it at the moment? And they said, oh, it's just off White Island in Whakatane. What we did was we contacted 2 other units. One was Whakatane and the other was Makatu. So Whakatane Coast Guard went out and collected the vessel near White Island and started to take it towards Tauranga. They handed over to Makatu Coast Guard, who then towed the vessel another 1/3 of the way, and then we collected them and then brought them back into the harbour. So it was over, what have we got, over 16 hours worth of vessel time. The reason they couldn't go to Waihi was it was a big launch, so it wasn't able to get through the Makatu bar, so the Whakatane bar, and so it needed to get back to its berth at the marina. This person was a Coast Guard member. Our Coast Guard membership is $10 a year with a suggested donation of $90, rounding it to 100. And so they were a member. So that assist came for them free. If they were not a member, they would have been looking at almost $5,000 worth of tow and fees. The reason we had to assist them was they had almost run out of diesel. Very naughty of them because they should have been prepared, but that's what happens sometimes. We do all kinds of assists. This here is, we expect to be doing some more of them fairly soon. This here is a cruise ship. We're helping doing a medical evacuation of an American tourist who fell ill, and we're the vessel there. The port doesn't do it. We're the ones that will do it. We'll go out there and we will take those people. So our volunteers go out there, help get the person onto the vessel, and then we take them to shore where we transfer them to the St. John's ambulance. This here is photos like this here, you don't actually appreciate how big the water is here. This here is about 4 metre swells. The launch there is almost 20 metres long, and we're towing it back through into the harbour. They'd got in trouble. I think the engines had failed, and they were worried about being actually washed up upon shore. When you're towing a vessel like this here, there's a number of concerns. One is the possibility of the vessel catching a wave and screaming down and catching up on you. The other one is getting caught between two waves, and there's massive tension on that rope and something breaking. So there's a lot of communication with the crew on the back to the person who's helming the boat as well, on when to speed up, slow down, so you're trying to keep that same kind of rhythm as you're towing the vessel. This photo here is the same vessel the same day once we're inside the harbour. So sometimes what's outside the harbour can be considerably different to once we're inside the harbour. If you see there in the middle of the picture, there's a green marker. It's your starboard marker. Now, if that person had gone on the other side of the starboard marker, he would have been in about 20 metres worth of water. That person decided to go on the wrong side and ended up on the sandbar. We get once sort of we were allowed to go back into the world during the COVID situation, there was a lot of people that went out and bought boats, and there was a lot of people that didn't really have a lot of idea on what to do, but they were keen to buy a boat, get in the boat, and I want to go that way, not realising that going that way is not the way to go. You actually have to take the long way around because there's a great big sandbar sitting there. So for vessels like this, sometimes we can use sea legs to actually drive up and drag them off. Most of the time we have to tell people you're going to have to sit there and wait until the tide comes up, and then we may be able to drag you off, or you may be able to refloat yourself. This vessel was about 8 months ago. I got a phone call and the person said, we've just broken down by Kaurea Island, and we need a tow because we're really not making any way. The tide was going out at about 4 knots and they were coming in at about 5 knots, and they were really struggling. And I said, yeah, of course we can do that for you. Are you a Coast Guard member? And they said, yes. And I said, that's fantastic. Well, it'll be no cost to you for our assistance. And they said, oh, our boat is fairly big. And I said, what's big? And they said, 80. And I said, 80 what? And they said, 80 tonnes. This vessel they had actually taken from Australia, and they had brought it across, and they were actually doing a tour around New Zealand, and one of the diesel engines failed, and the other one went back into limp home mode to protect it. So our 14-metre little catamaran was still able to tow this here at about 6 knots, quite comfortably, and then we took them into Bridge Marina, and they were very appreciative of our volunteers, and then brought down some beers later on to thank them, so that was really nice of them. This story here I really like. It's a gentleman who was a former British submariner, navigator, and he came with his family to retire in New Zealand, and he actually suffered a stroke, so his ability to speak was not great, and he was sailing back from Auckland back to, I believe he lives in Gisborne, and he wasn't intending on stopping at Tauranga, but just as he got past the Bowentown entrance, his little diesel engine on his yacht, which is a 9-metre yacht, stopped. Now, it's really hard to actually tell there, but there's actually no wind. All it is really rough sea. And what was happening was he was being pushed in towards Matakana Island. And for those of you that are unaware, a lot of people go surfing at Matakana Island because there's a break there, so the land sort of starts to lift up and it causes some really big swells. So this gentleman had no wind on his yacht and no motor, and so he's trying to stay away from the breaking waves of Matakana Island. So he was using his tiller, so he was sitting and he was swinging on the back of it. That's like the steering mechanism in the back of his yacht, and he was basically trying to paddle his way out. He rang his wife and said, I think I'm in trouble, and I might need some help. His wife rang the police. The police said, set off your electronic location device, an EPIRB. And our vessel was actually just heading out the entrance to go help some people who were fishing, and I think they needed a jump start. So we diverted, went and we grabbed this guy here, hooked him up. He was about 150 metres away from the land of Matakana Island. If he'd got there, it would have turned his boat over and it could have been disastrous. He was absolutely exhausted when we got to him, and we actually sent sea legs out and we put him on sea legs as well, and we put one of our crew on the yacht, and then we brought it all the way in. The next day I went because he wasn't planning on being in Tauranga. I went and picked him up in a ute and took him to the supermarket and got him something to eat and all that kind of stuff as well. And he wasn't a member, but we didn't charge him because I just felt sorry for him, and he was a nice guy. This vessel here, the people were intending on actually going to Tauranga, and they put it on autopilot, but went to sleep. And it went past where they were intending to go and went straight up onto the shore there. So even people who are really skilled and are good boaties will sometimes do some things that they don't intend to do. This photo is a little bit hard to sort of make out. This here's actually outside Papamoa, so it's outside in the open ocean. There's 44-gallon drums holding up like a deck. It's a homemade, we'll call it boat, if you'd like. The gentleman at the back is actually sitting on the outboard. One of the guys is sitting on a deck chair, the other guy is sitting on a chili bin, and there's no prizes for guessing what's inside the chili bin. They didn't need our help, they didn't need our assistance to get back safely, but clearly they needed some help. None of them are wearing life jackets. The Maritime Survey that I was talking about before, they estimate only about half of people who take to the water consider whether or not they have enough life jackets before going out. So in New Zealand we have a lot of bad kind of habits. And sometimes too we do night work as well, which is actually, it's really neat coming into the harbour at night. It's like a Christmas tree. The first time I went in, I was glad I wasn't helming because there's lights everywhere, and even though you know where to go, it's actually really hard to sort of navigate and figure out where to go. Coast Guard is we're not customs, we are not the police. All we are is to go out there and help people who are in trouble and get them back safely so they can go back to their families. One of the things that we are doing to make that a bit more effective is building a new boat. This is our new boat here. I think if I press the button, no. It looks very similar to our old one. What we did was we went to a number of different designers and said we need a boat that will meet these conditions. And we selected 2 designers. They both designed concept designs, and both of them came back with catamaran designs, just like this one here. This vessel here will do almost 80 kilometres an hour at its top speed. It's almost 15 metres long and about 5.5 metres wide. It's designed by Nick DeWall from Technicraft in Auckland, and it will be built by Q West. Q West builds all the whale watch boats, the White Island boats, customs boats, police boats, and Nick designs a lot of those as well. So we know we're getting a really good vessel. It originally was going to cost $2.3 million, and about this time last year, I contacted Q West and said, we are scheduled to be building in July of 2022. Are we going to get a price increase? And he said, I think we will. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll give you a call in the new year. But if we do, it won't be a lot. And I was like, oh, that's good. I got a call in April, and he said, you're not going to like my call. It's gone up to 2.7. The aluminium costs alone went up almost $300,000. He had to increase his staff wage by $20 an hour to hold on to staff because they were going to other places. He said shipping costs and supplies have just gone through the roof. So I had a lot of sleepless nights because I thought all I have to do is raise $1.5 million this year. Now I have to raise more than that. And at the moment, I have raised the $1.5 million, so we have 2.3 sitting there ready to go. The build has started, obviously. We won't be finished until December next year, but we still have $500,000 to go. So if there's anyone who wants a boat named after themselves, it's only $500,000. This boat here will also give us the ability to cover from Whakatane all the way up to the top of the Coromandel if other Coast Guard vessels need it as well. Coast Guard New Zealand's actually supported this vessel by allocating us $400,000, which has actually come from the Lotteries Commission, and because they actually see this here as actually a strategic vessel for this particular area. What can you do to help? Well, there's a number of things that you could do apart from giving me $500,000 and getting the boat named after you. If you have a family member or you are a person who uses the water, whether that be a jet ski, a kayak, a yacht, a boat, encourage them to join Coast Guard. It's estimated only between 5 and 10% of people are Coast Guard members. We have an Acorn Foundation, so we have an endowment fund. So anyone who leaves money in their will, what we do is actually put that into an endowment fund so that money will stay there in perpetuity, because we don't want to spend some money that somebody's given us and just spend it on fuel or something like that there. We want it to keep giving over time. And one of the other ways you can actually help us is volunteer if you would like to. We have a number of volunteers. Our oldest volunteer is in his 80s and our youngest volunteer in his mid-20s. So we have a range of different people. I really like this picture to conclude. It's a picture of the emergency services, and basically we just go where they can't. So we're part of an emergency services team that are full of enthusiastic volunteers that give a heck of a lot for their community. And I really like to thank First Mortgage Trust for helping us keep our mission of saving lives at sea going. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them once you're having a cup of tea and stuff like that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dane. Now we've got our final speaker, which is our Youth Sponsorship Award. Now, for more than 17 years, we've offered an annual youth sponsorship grant. This sponsorship has been open to people between the ages of 16 to 25 who are excelling in their chosen field at a national or international level at sport, music, or art. Over the years, we have had recipients who have excelled in the arts and sports, including sailing, clay shooting, swimming, lacrosse, and athletics. Our very first recipient was Moss Burmester, who went on to be one of New Zealand's most successful swimmers, representing New Zealand at both Commonwealth and Olympic Games. Our 2018 recipient was Fletcher Oxford, whose passion was music, drama and music. He went on to study acting at the Shakespeare Globe Theatre in London and was chosen in the Young Shakespeare Company. He played numerous roles in theatre including Les Mis and West Side Story. Our previous recipient was Kata Perry, who was selected in the New Zealand Women's Lacrosse World Cup team in 2022. So after a 3-year hiatus, which is thanks again to COVID, we are pleased to announce our 22 recipient, which is Quinn Boyle. Now, I'm not going to steal Quinn's thunder, but he is an endurance swimmer that often competes to raise money for charities to give back to the community. What impressed us about Quinn was not only his impressive swimming achievements, but also his ambitions, determination, and his very humble nature. He epitomises everything that we stand for as a business. He is living our values of teamwork, integrity, and achievement. He has a real growth mindset, wants to challenge himself, and wants to keep learning, and all of this at the age of 17. We're very proud to support Quinn and believe he has a very bright future. So please join me in congratulating Quinn and welcoming him to say a few words.
Thank you, Paul. Kia ora koutou katoa. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today talking to you, and it's an absolute honour to be the FMT Youth Scholarship recipient for 2022. As Paul said, I'm Quinn. I'm a swimmer, and I'm from a small place called Otamarako, which is about half an hour down the coast. And I grew up in Otamarako, went to the little primary school there, had about 80 kids. And that's where I learnt to swim, actually, in the little 12-metre pool they have there. So, yeah. I'm currently attending Hamilton Boys High School. I'm in the hostel there. I'm a Year 12 student, and I've got end-of-year exams starting next week. So it's actually nice to be here today talking to you all, get a bit of a break from studying. So I come from a family full of teachers. My grandmother, my mother, father, sister, auntie, uncle, all school teachers. So that's why I'm not going to be a school teacher. We actually own an avocado block out at Otamarako, so I'm quite interested in the agribusiness side of things. So yeah, that's what I want to do for my career. Today I've whipped together a bit of a slideshow for you, just going over some of the things I've done in the past and some of the things I'm hoping to do in the near future. So, yeah, let's crack into it. in the world of swimming, anything over 10 kilometres is considered a marathon swim. So in 2019, I started open water swimming, and then I was like, oh, let's have a go at a marathon swim, 10k, and did a couple, and I was like, oh, it's not bad. So then I was like, let's move on to some ultra marathon swim. So anything over 20 kilometres is an ultra marathon swim. So in 2020, right at the end of 2020, in December, I did my first ultramarathon swim, which was a double crossing of Lake Rotaidi, which was 30 k's. And I said to my coach, oh, it's going to be easy. All I have to do is not stop swimming. I just keep going. And she said it's it's harder than it sounds. And she was right. It was very hard. I had to go to a pretty dark place in order to finish. But we made it through. And about 8.5 hours later, I was done. And I other than having to go to a pretty dark place to get myself to keep going, I actually enjoyed it. So, yeah, it was fun. Then we moved on to Lake Taupo. So after I'd done Lake Rotaidi, I moved on to Lake Taupo, which was 42 kilometres. The main goal at the time when I was looking at moving on to ultra marathons, the main goal was Lake Taupo, and Lake Rotaidi was kind of a build up to see if I could even swim that distance. So I did Lake Rotaidi, then I moved on to this, and I walked into the water at 3 o'clock in the morning, and 13 hours and 45 minutes later, I reached the end, and it was an awesome day, out on the water. Other than this, I got extremely sunburnt, even though I put on about 10 layers of sunscreen before. I enjoyed it, other than the sunburn. And with Taupo, it was during the COVID kind of time, so my Ultimate Arco school, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't get a chance to put on their annual fundraiser they do every year, which was the surf fishing competition. So I got an opportunity through doing Taupo to raise a bit of money for that. So it felt pretty cool to do that for the old school. Then a month after Taupo, I got the opportunity to do the Westpac chopper swim. So that was from Waiheke Island back to one of the bays. I can't really remember which one it was at the moment. But yeah, that was an awesome day. That's me swimming there, and I had my dad kayaking beside me. So it was a really special day, and it was like that all day, really nice and flat. So that was a really cool day out on the water, and for a great cause as well. So the ultramarathon swims I've done this year. So I had a crack at the Cook Strait at the start of this year, which is 25 kilometres from north to south. As you can see in that photo, it's not too bad, it's a little bit choppy. That's me swimming there, and that little IRB beside me as my support people for Rush. And it's not too bad in that photo, but about half an hour after that photo was taken, the wind started to pick up. The waves started smashing me. But I kept going. At about the 6 hour mark, I stopped for a feed, having a drink of water, and Phil says to me, I was at about the 20k mark, but we've got at least another 3+ hours of swimming. And if the tide was doing what it was meant to and all that, it was at least only an hour and a half. So I was like, all right. I was feeling pretty knackered already. And so I was like, all right, put my head down, started going hard, and then I woke up on the boat because I got hypothermia and all that. But, that's all good. And, and then I was pretty gutted, but it's just the way it goes. The Cook Strait's pretty unpredictable. But I was pretty hit hard because that same day you can see there's my IRB there, and there's another IRB in the background, and there was also another swimmer swimming that day called Nick Hobson. And unfortunately, just after he completed the swim, he passed away, so that hit me pretty hard, And then, so I wanted to do another swim and dedicate it to Nick, and luckily I got offered to do the first attempt swim and be the first official person to do that. So yeah, I had a crack at that, and I just put my head down, and I had the goal of finishing it in under 6 hours. So I just put my head down and swam so hard as I could for 6 hours basically, and I got it done in like 5:58 or something. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, giving back. So through my swims, it's pretty special because like I've been able to give back to community, as I mentioned earlier, like being able to give back to my school and all that. So, well, this was back in 2019. I hadn't done any ultra marathons yet, but I set up a little mufti day to raise money because the Australian bushfires were going on at the time. So I did the Motiti Island swim back to just Papamoa, and that felt like a really long swim at the time, but because I was only just still getting into it. But it was an awesome day out in the water. I had my mum and dad in the boat beside me, so it was really cool. Then I also got, right after the White Island incident, I got the opportunity to do Whale Island back to the beach, the heads, at Whakatane there. So I raised a bit of money for that, and it was kind of special to me as well because where we are located at Osamaraka, we're up on a bit of hill and we see White Island every day, so it felt pretty cool. And yeah, it was an awesome day out on the water. Like, it was pretty cool being able to be that close up to Whale Island because I like see it all the time. So, and I managed to get a TECT award for just some environmental gear. Me and my grandmother and parents, we do lots of sand dune planting around our place because we're right on the beach. So yeah, and through my work at the Pokina Surf Life Club, so just lots of volunteering hours there, and yeah. National Open Water Success. So just through my training, I do lots of training in the pool and stuff. I've managed to gain a bit of speed as well as the endurance. So they do, every year in the open water season, they put on a few open water races. So there's and it gives me an opportunity to see the country as well. There's photos of me at Waihi, then I'm down in Taupo, Auckland, and there's just me up on the podium in a few photos. That's me and my mum in the bottom right. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm able to do that as well. Media and publicity. Through my swimming, it's given me the opportunity to, I guess, build confidence and I don't know, come out of my shell a bit and do some media things. And so I was lucky enough to get a sponsorship from R-Line, which is an electrolyte company based in the Mount. And so I have to do a couple Instagram posts, social media posts for them, and just, give them a thanks. And it's once again, building confidence for me. I've been able to have a few interview experience. After my swims, I usually write reports and just chuck it up on a little blog or something like that. It's just about what I experienced during the swim or something like that. And and I was also lucky enough for the chopper swim I did, since me and that other girl in the picture there were the youngest people to do it. We were lucky enough to get an interview with Pippa Wetzel from Fair Go, and that was pretty crazy. I was really nervous, but it was good to have that experience, I guess. But it's pretty cool. Current goals. So first off, at the start of this year, July. In July, New Zealand held the first ever New Zealand Ice Swimming Champs, which is swimming in water that's below 5 degrees. And yeah, I gave it a go. I just went down and was like, we'll just see how it goes. And then I ended up breaking a few records and whatnot. And then New Zealand decided to take a team over to the ice swimming champs in France starting next year in January. So I'm got the opportunity to tag along in that. And we're going to go over there and swim in some ice. And we'll see how it goes. Have as much fun as we can. Yeah, and it's really cool because ice swimming's like it's like building as a sport. So there's a good chance that it could possibly be an Olympic sport in the next Winter Olympics, maybe the next. I don't know. Yeah, so it's really exciting. Watch that space. Ambitions. That's me sitting in the freezer. Getting used to the cold and everything. Building up, just getting used to the ice really. And yeah, I sit in there quite often. Ambitions. So hopefully this year, maybe the start of next year, February maybe, Pukahina Surf Life Club, which is the club I'm part of, is planning to put on the the longest rescue attempt. So I'm going to be swimming with the club from Motiti back to Makatu, and we're going to try raise a bit of money because they're trying to actually build a new club rooms. So it's pretty cool. Marathon swim to raise money every year up in Auckland. They just do a marathon swim to raise money for a different charity, so I'm going to be out doing that as well. And as I mentioned earlier, through my training and in the open water season and all that, build up a bit of speed. So I compete in the New Zealand Open Water Champs and all that, and it just gives me a chance to see where I'm at against the other swimmers and yeah, just get that racing feel, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, so through my swimming as well and through the swimming community, like I get the chance to go overseas. And like Rarotonga, I've been offered to go over there and get a bit of work experience and teach some of the people over there to swim because, believe it or not, like quite a lot of people do not know how to swim over there, even though they're surrounded by water. Yeah, so that's going to be a cool opportunity as well. And of course, I'm not going to let the cook straight get away from me. I'm going to get that done one day. Yeah, it's not going to get away from me. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, really. I want to give a big thank you to FMT for giving me this opportunity and allowing me to pursue my sporting career, I guess. And I want to thank my family, my friends that I've made along the way, and all my coaches that have taught me a lot of the things that I have gained from my sport, I guess. And yeah, just a huge thanks, really. And thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you all today. Thank you.